Okay, so they sent me this air filter. So let's just kind of check it out and see what we have here. All right. Got the corner protectors. So they definitely are trying to make sure that the product arrives in good condition. Got that high density foam, and it's packed up, ready to go. All you got to do is set it or mount it wherever you want it at. So that's cool. Obviously, with the packing, they're wanting to make sure it arrives to you in good shape. Okay, so the system is a pretty simplistic system. You've got your outer filter, which this is, I think, has a 10 MERV. And then you've got a 1 micron internal filter. So this is like just a cloth type filter. And then you've got the housing in here with the screen. And you have kind of what I would refer to as the squirrel cage type fan, which is the same as like a home central unit, which are some of the more efficient type fans. And you got your little control panel, and that's all it is to it. So you have the fan that's going to be blowing out here, sucking in air from the front, blowing out to the back. And also, this particular model has the ion, which I know for a while there that was real big, that the companies were selling like the ion air filters. What it does is it charges the particles as they pass through, which then makes them sink out of the air so they don't float, which is what is getting in your lungs, is the particles that float. So any particles that do make it through will be charged, and then that'll make them stick to the floor or the walls or whatever, and make everything kind of fall out of suspension and keep it out of your lungs. They did send all kinds of hardware. You know, you got the remote, you've got these hooks that will screw into the top of the machine. They've got hooks that will screw into like your ceiling, your rafter, the chain to go in between the two. They've also got these little brackets here that you can mount, and then that will put these little ears out to the side. And then they got like concrete anchors here that you can drill into a concrete and bolt up there. However, the only thing that they don't have is the bolts that will bolt this onto the machine. So I ran out, and it's a 6mm by 1mm thread, and you get you about a 20mm long bolt, and that should be all you need if you wanted to mount those on. And that's the only thing that I have found that they didn't have in the box here. It shows right here in the book to mount these little brackets, and it screws right in the top. However, these brackets are lower than what the handle is. So that means that this top, those brackets aren't going to be able to make it because these are not high enough. Not a big deal, we just need to take that handle off.
What we're going to do is just remove the 2 screws. You don't have to worry about any kind of washers or nuts falling on the inside because the housing is threaded. Just once you pop the handle off, put the screws back in the hole, and you're good to go. Now, I checked the timestamps on the video, and this is all running real time. You know, it says to use 2 people to mount this, but you know how it is. You don't always have 2 people in a shop. But I think it took 1 minute and like 16 seconds for me to mount this. Now, I didn't mention it before, but you see in the video here, there's 4 feet. So they have these nice little rubber feet. If you want to set this on a tabletop or in the corner somewheres, you know, you can certainly do that. However, this thing puts out a good bit of air. It's 500 cubic feet is what it's rated at, which is more than most of them at this size. So let's test it and see just how well this puts out, because the reason I had been holding off on purchasing one of these is I didn't know just how well they worked. And now that I have one here in the shop, I just purchased a new PM monitor. to check for the particulate matter. And I also got a decibel meter, and we're going to just kind of make sure that this thing is definitely worth buying. I'm really curious just to see how well this performs when we're checking some actual data points. It's time to start checking out this machine and seeing just what it'll do and how it functions. So you can press the button on the machine and turn it on and off. There's also a speed button. You can go from low, medium to high. Now, if you have the remote, you can do the same functions, but on the remote there is a button for the ionizer. There's not a button on the machine for the ionizer, but whatever state it was in when you turned it off on the machine, the ionizer will come back on in that state. So if you had the ionizer on, which I don't know why you wouldn't, when you turn the machine off, if you turn it off on the button on the control panel, it's going to come back on. There is also a timer on the remote that you can press, and then you can change it from 1 to 12 hours so that you can have this thing running when you leave your shop, and when you get back in the next day, the air is perfectly clean, but you did not have to pay to run it all night. This thing puts out some good airflow. So I measured just to see how far I was, and I was about 14 foot from the machine where I was doing my measurements at, and I put this anemometer here to see just how much airflow I had. And then I'm like, wait a second, I thought this was a lot higher, and I realized I was standing in front of blocking the airflow. So when I step to the side, you can see this thing is blowing about 4 miles per hour, 14 foot away from the machine. And then you can see the little white, that is my PM 2.5. I was in the middle of testing and seeing just how well this cleared the air out. And so that was not moved the entire testing, and that's where it's set from the beginning to the end. How do you test to see if one of these things really work? Well, this is my sanding from my sander. So it's mostly baby powder, fine dust. There's a little bit, I sometimes will hook that vacuum to my track saw, but mostly it's all comes straight off my sander. So what I did is I blew this up into the air and let it just saturate the whole shop. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just blowing some smoke around. I could set a box fan up and the smoke would kind of dissipate. I wanted to see just how well this thing would clear the particulates out of the air. At 1207, this peaked at 118 parts per million. I let everything settle out, and at 1218 you can see here that it had significantly dropped off and then it had leveled out. And what that is because I blew everything, and so a lot of the bigger particles and stuff were suspended in the air, and all that settled down, and it was just that fine baby dust particle that you don't want in your lungs. I turned the machine on high, and you can see on the graph that the levels started to drop, and then there's a bump up. Well, I wasn't for sure if all the dust on the table would be getting blowed around because the machine blows so hard. So I did take my blower and blew off the table, and that's where you get that little bump up on the chart in the middle. But then at 1237, we had reached 10 parts per million, which the EPA recommends under 12. So now we're back in a clean environment. I wanted to make sure that the stuff wasn't just settling out of the air is the reason why it went down. So I turned the machine off, and now I let it set here for 15 minutes. So I went to 1252, and it was actually then reading 13 parts per million, whereas it had been around 10 to 12 15 minutes earlier, and you can see where it's a flat line. So we had went almost 15 minutes or over 15 minutes with no significant change. So then I turned the machine back on, and within at 1307, we actually hit 0. It's showing here 1 part per million, but like the next second it was at 0. When my saws are running, it doesn't matter. But any other time in the shop, I hate having to wear ear protection. And so I was really concerned that this thing was going to be super loud and just make a whole lot of noise. The one that I have currently is a homemade job with a box fan, and I don't run it all the time because it's so loud. So I checked it here at my table saw about 4 foot away from the machine, and I'm staying under 60 decibels, and this is on high. So when it's on low, it's even less than that. Well, this thing definitely will clear the air out. There's no doubt about it. When I was at the 13 parts, you couldn't see it in the air. The air looked perfectly clean. So a lot of times you think the air is clean just because you don't see the particulate floating, but it's still there. So I'm really glad I got this. I think it definitely works. I like the fact that it has the ionizer because that is going to keep the particles from getting resuspended or staying suspended. That'll get them out of the air. So if you like this, let me know. If there's something else that I could have showed, definitely let me know and I'll try to do better next time. But until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I will be putting affiliate links down in the description.